To begin with, I have to say sorry to anyone who has been patiently awaiting the Tailwind review that I remarked on at the end of my Sonic and the Gunslinger review. It's not happening. At least, not for a fair while. It turns out that I was too hasty in confirming they would be my next target, because it is not a mod that plays nice on controller. Don't get your hopes up waiting on that one, because I have no idea when or even if I plan to return to it and give it a second chance. I still have not been able to finish it, even while trying and failing to use keyboard and mouse. What can I say? These things sometimes happen. I have been working on preparations for my 5,000 subscriber special for several months now, a process that has taken even longer than I expected and which has given me cause to celebrate the stagnation my channel has suffered from for most of this year. I've needed a lot of time to work on it, and that stagnation has helped me avoid hitting the big milestone too early and then having to admit to everyone that I have nothing ready. However, part of the reason it stagnated is because I have intentionally avoided reviewing any SRP2 characters for a fair while. As I've made my way through my long collection of mods though, some of which I haven't touched for years, I've realised that a few of them have since received updates. Some of them quite major updates. Some of them, in fact, so major that they can include entirely new characters. It would be awkward to cover, say, 2/3 of a mod as part of this otherwise comprehensive character ranking, only covering 2 out of the 3 characters in a mod. And so I've realised that I need to review all of these later additions on the channel in advance of the special, so that their inclusion in it makes sense. I should clarify that later additions is a relative term. Some of these characters have gone uncovered for years, as is the case with today's character, Huggert. Let's remedy that now. Who is the long overlooked third member of the FavChars pack? How does he play? And what does he do? Huggert can best be described as an all-rounder, probably leaning a little more towards being a flyer than a speedster or an explorer. Supposedly some sort of drowsy mage, his moveset is tied to stars, space, and the night, with 2 major active abilities, 1 less important ability that's probably just there for troubleshooting, and a number of passives of varying degrees of relevance. He's a surprisingly good fighter and is better at taking on bosses than the average SRP2 character, but it's clear that the intended game plan is to find a way to higher grounds, then maintaining that early height for as long as possible. The snooze cloud is your most obvious tool for doing this. It's a standard enough short fly that devolves into a slow descent, pairing well with Huggert's reduced gravity to cross large gaps. You've almost certainly seen something very similar in some other mod and in some other moveset, but I think the best comparison, at least for today, is with Frank's Propeller Burst, considering that they come from the same mod and all. I didn't much like the Propeller Burst. It really could do with some way to cancel it before using the supposedly optional double jump feature, which can mess up your positioning and feels like an unnecessary arbitration for doing something very simple. Fav seems to have recognised the problem here because Huggert's snooze cloud can be easily cancelled for the sake of maintaining flow, or even triggered again to further flatten out a descent, making it much more versatile. The snooze cloud is likely to be the main way in which you make up height and distance, but it's not the only way. Huggert's other major active ability is the Star Bullet, a fast-firing, slow-moving projectile with a number of untraditional properties and use cases. For instance, it can be charged up, giving it higher speeds, a larger hitbox, a piercing effect, and even more damage. Something you'd think would come up in SRB2 fairly often, but really doesn't. It's exciting to see a character that can do more than 1 damage with each attack, because now there's a little more of a strategic edge to a boss fight. Do you play it safe and fire off volleys of uncharged star bullets, or, knowing that you're making yourself vulnerable in doing so, do you charge up a stronger attack to take the boss out faster? Now, you're actually thinking about the boss fight again, not simply going through the motions, having to think about patterns to know when to fire off an attack and when to pull back. SRB2 combat is still far from good with Huggert, but there are some elements here that I'd really like to see become parts of standard boss design in the future. Alternatively, you can shoot the star bullets below you to maneuver yourself and help with traversal. Using a star bullet in the air without a directional input will cause the bullet to fire downwards, the recoil of which sends you upwards. This can be done a maximum of 5 times, the recoil effect diminishing with each bullet until you aren't boosted at all. Although the effect is fairly minimal to begin with, so it isn't all that noticeable. Hence, why I argue that Huggert is more about maintaining height than creating it, as would be the case for someone like Tails. He can get a certain amount of it by using the snooze cloud, but the reduced gravity in the star bullet and the degraded cloud are all used more to flatten a descent over reversing it. The star bullets take a little bit of practice to get used to when using them like this, the act of letting go of your joystick for a split second to fire off one being a little bit unusual, but it shouldn't take too long to get to grips with what you're doing. I think I had the inputs down within a few levels. Finally, there are a few other things that Huggert can do. He can cross himself to fit in crawl spaces, for example, although I only ever use this for the fun sprites. It's just not used on the routes you're likely to take with Huggert. Hence why I argue it's probably there as a hasty way to guarantee he's capable of beating every vanilla level, more so than as a considered part of the moveset. Additionally, alongside the reduced gravity effect that is in effect at all times, Huggert also takes longer to die in space. Or maybe doesn't at all. His description claims the former, but I've never even seen a timer pop up, much less begin counting down, whenever I was wasting time in a space segment, so who knows. The lack of space segments in vanilla or modded levels makes the passive almost worthless, to be honest. Although it has such a little effect that it's not like you're missing out on much if you're not searching for levels that include space. Less of a problem here than it was, for example, with Stardust, a character whose entire identity revolved around the space affinity passive that they would realistically see maybe twice in a playthrough. In comparison to that, better to just be ignorable. A decent moveset, far from the best, but also far from the worst. There are some other characters that are more about maintaining height than creating it, and I'd say Huggert is in the upper tiers for that. Although that's not actually saying much, because the batting rate for the concept is pretty poor. Huggert's superform has all of the effects you'd expect, as well as a major buff to the snooze cloud. It now never devolves into a glide, and it can even be re-triggered while still maintaining its standard properties, making it into a far more typical fly. As such, Huggert becomes a much more typical flyer, and the star bullets especially see a lot less use. It's up to you whether that's a good or a bad thing. I just find that I like superforms that actually confer something more than a higher top speed and invincibility, even if this was a particularly easy and obvious buff. There's also these really large and overpowering particle effects for some reason, although Huggerts at least look vaguely appropriate for the character. Franks and dummies, who also have them, look like generic occult symbols, a really strange creative choice. I don't get what Huggert is supposed to be, which is not a great start when discussing visual design and sprites. I'm not even sure if he's supposed to look like something, or if he's just some nondescript alien or spirit. Perhaps a snowman? That was the vibe I got from the very first time I saw him. I believe his trailer was set in a snowy environment, and all of his nightwear could double as winter clothing. Whatever he may be, I'm not in love with his sprites. Saping is a constant flaw throughout, as is the attempts at putting a lot of detail into space where there just isn't the room. His robe, for example, is a blanket that's supposed to drag along the ground like a train, but it's so pointed in the rear that the effect is just completely lost, and the need to cover it in stars meant that there was no room to put the folds that would have signified it was a blanket. His face is also quite detailed for how little space it has, which means it can be hard to make out expressions amidst the eyes and the whiskers and the jowls, as well as the line art of your hat and the blanket trim. Coloration is slapdash, being a hodgepodge of random cool colours that vaguely correlate to sleep in the night, but could just as easily be winter or the cold. Worst of all, he doesn't really fit in with Frank and Dummy. They had contrasting heights and shape languages, Frank being tall and square while Dummy was sort of round, but they were still clearly a team. They both wore similar casual wear in various warm colours. Huggert isn't any of this. He's cold, he's short, and if there was an attempt to make him cute and rounded, it has not translated in-game. The FavCharacters pack has never been outstanding in regards to raw sprite quality, instead defining itself graphically with zany movement and posing, but with so little of that zany energy here, the sprite issues once more come to the foreground. I really think that Huggert could do with a few more rounds of edits in this field. Overall, Huggert's perhaps a little better than the other members of the FavCharacters pack. Not to an extent that it transforms the pack, makes it a necessity to play. We're talking an improvement of maybe 10 to 15%, a low B rank becoming a middling B. But enough that I can see the creator was looking at the flaws of his previous works and finding ways to improve them. After a short settling in period, the moveset becomes pretty fun, so any complaints I have is nothing to do with that. To fix its flaws would require foundational changes that would result in a completely different character. If Fav was to go back and try and improve on Huggert, I'd recommend he looks more at the visual side of things. Sprites could do with a fair bit of work, but it'd be best to start with clarifying what Huggert actually is. I'd even go so far as to say, considering how little he has to do with Frank and Dummy, that maybe he might be better served being spun off into his own mod. I've always been of the mind that characters in a pack should have core ties to one another, which Frank and Dummy do, but Huggert feels totally distinct from them. You could keep all of the few interactions he has with the duo, but being a distinct and separate mod might adjust expectations to realise that he isn't actually a third member of the party. Certainly it would have helped with my expectations. Good character, not quite great, worth checking out if you've liked Fav's previous work, plays better, looks worse. And with that said, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, tune in next time, and ciao.